So let's step back in time a little bit. We'll start with the very near term. Let's go backwards. You may remember some of these things. You may have worked on some of these things. There's that AOL thing.
So I'm putting in an entity called a
This is Douglas Engelbart.
full of other entities called words.
This is called the mother of all
If I make some
demos,
mistakes, I can back up a little bit.
where he is typing on the screen that's overlaid on his image.
So I have a
And he's going to use something that's going to freak
statement
everyone
with
out,
words, and I can do some
which is a
operations
pointer.
on these. I can copy a word. That word might copy after itself. In fact,
He's going to copy words from one line to another.
Just do this a few times and get a bit of material there. And there are other.
And in many ways, this is the moment that started a lot of what we all work on today. I kind of wonder, people in that room, did they even understand what they were looking at, first of all? And if those that did, did it just totally freak them out? I can't imagine. But what was interesting, he worked at the Stanford Research Institute, and I think it was actually called the Augmented Science Group or something, Augmented Science Team. It's funny how those words come back around now. But he worked just to make it possible, just to make it function. So it all of our work began really with simply making things work, whether it's in service world, technology world, digital world, whatever. How do you just simply make it go? So the functioning, from a business perspective, is really how do we make and sell something? How we can produce the product? And so things like user interface, in his day they called it human-computer interaction. Many still do. And it was the advent of the role of the software designer. Someone who actually was on the team and cared about what the software looked like or felt like. And then moving along to a stage of fixing. We still had to make things function, but how could we make them better? From a business perspective, how could we make them better so we could sell more of them, right? And so TurboTax. Well, maybe marketing said, let's call it Deluxe, so they'll upgrade from last year's. And maybe the usability people said, and no one's getting started very quickly, so let's add the Quick Start Guide, right? But in a nutshell, that's a lot of where the attention was, is the term user-friendly came up, and we worked on usability as kind of the activity. And then it's moved to a third F of finding, which is a lot of where the design thinking focus has been, of what are the unmet needs? What are the product gaps that are out there? I have a broom, but wow, wouldn't a Swiffer make my life much better, right? And so ethnography, prototyping, those were kind of the activities that capitalized on this opportunity. We always had to work on the stuff, still make it work, still fix it, hopefully before it goes out the door. We all know cases where it's fixed after, and find the new opportunities. And that brings us to today, and maybe, Sarah, I'm going to define an edge, hopefully for us. Because these are 20th century solutions, right? A lot of us have worked on things, had our formative years in the 20th century, right, of how we learned to work. It came with a certain model of how to do it. The challenge is we now have 21st century problems. So let me address these separately. First, a 20th century mentality is how do we manufacture it, and then how do we sell it? And then the big crazy innovation in the 20th century, let's advertise it. Let's tell people what it is so that they will want it and we can sell more of it, right? And you can see where let's just make something, manufacture something that works. Let's fix it so we can sell more, and let's find more kinds of things to move through this process. I think one of the big challenges here, though, is in the 21st century, there's disappointment that happens. You buy it, you take it home, and it wasn't what you anticipated. Someone advertised to you and told you what it was going to be all about, and it didn't live up to it. And so if you want a relationship with someone, if you want them to continue to be a customer, if in the social media world you want them to advocate for your brand and your products, this doesn't work out. Right? So to take an example, there are all those wonderful commercials out there that make us cry almost when we see, the mother and the child and the dad hugging and engaging around technology. And then you actually go and engage with the service, and it's like, wah, 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 right? I call this service anticipation gap, that they really put a lot of money into building up your anticipation, and then whoosh, boom, down the gap as far as what you actually end up experiencing. So, 21st century problems. This was briefly hit on yesterday, but I think more and more we're going to see things that are the triple bottom line problems. Problems of what are we doing for people, what are we doing for the planet, what are we doing for profit? Because there's going to be so much more data around to let us know what the consequences were of the services we created, of the decisions we made, of the experiences we put out in the world. We're just going to know more, and we're going to know more about these consequences. And so I think we have to keep in mind that the purpose of business is not making a thing. Okay? And also, the purpose of a business is not making a profit. I actually remember sitting in the final class of my capstone course in business school and it feeling like, wait a second, why didn't we talk about this at the beginning when the professor said the purpose of a business is making a profit? I think that's crap. I think the purpose of a business is to have and serve a customer, okay? I think that's a 21st century mentality, and I think by that, profit is just a byproduct of that good service. That when you serve a person, that means it's over time, that it's understanding them, it's treating them in a very human way, thoughtfully, respectfully. And that's what's going to guide us into smart decisions as we go forward and over the edge. So, okay, what is Brandon talking about? Let me try and bring it down to some pretty practical examples. Let's say you're out in the world. You need something quickly, you pull out your smartphone, you're trying to find a restaurant, a service, something nearby, and boom, this hits you, right? It just suddenly strikes you of how unnatural this is, this sort of 20th century approach to engaging someone when you're already doing something else. You have very limited time, very limited space on the screen, and this comes to you, right? And that's why I think maybe is a really great thing about mobile is there is no space and time for ads. And the only way a business has to help provide, has to get your attention is to provide a valuable service to you. Stop telling me what you do, just do it for me, right? That's how you're going to get my attention, that's how you're going to get my time. And I believe this mentality of service is really good for modern economies as well. That if you look at the US trade deficit, this is the part of it that's due to goods. We import more goods than we export, okay? 735 billion of them in 2012. That's how big the deficit is of just goods. So let's think about services, though, completely different. The United States actually exports more services than it imports. I think this means a lot, and I think this is something we should lean into. But it's not just good from a macro business perspective. I think it's very good from a business, a culture, a society perspective. To serve is very experiential. It's what we care about, but it's also very human. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. One of my favorite examples comes from this service. All of you aren't necessarily from Bay Area or somewhere extremely urban where the service is available, but I know those of you who have come in town and used it for maybe the first time and are loving it. This is Uber. So first screen. Let's say you're in a situation where you need a taxi, you need a cab, you need a town car. You open up the app, it shows you red dot where you are and where some cars are who can come pick you up, right? Here's where it gets really interesting. You set your pickup location, and then a driver responds and says, hey, I'll pick that person up. A message is sent to you, and look, it says, hi, Jordan, your Uber is en route. Simon is coming to pick you up. Now, this is totally different and more human, I think, because there's no dispatcher between me and this other person, or there almost doesn't feel like there's really technology in between me. Simon and I have made a personal commitment now to one another that I'm going to be at a certain place in a certain time, and so is he, and he's going to pick me up and give me a ride to wherever I want to go. That's so much more human than calling a dispatcher who's mad at me for calling somehow. Probably yelling at the taxi cab driver is what I usually hear over the radio when you get in the taxi cab. And I don't actually know if this person's going to show up. I don't know who they are. No one's made any commitment except the dispatcher who seems angry. And by the way, they take care of all the payment, tipping, and those other things. So actually, when you get done with your ride, you just jump out of the car and everything else is taken care of. Pretty cool and very, very human. And it can be the small things too. I love this. You're waiting at the bus. What are you going to do when your local mass transit is late yet again? But these moments matter, right? Or what about the case of going to the hospital, taking a small child into a situation that has equipment like this, right? So how do you tell them about it? How do you tell them what they're going to go through, why they need to go through it? But I think this also makes practical business sense. This equipment is probably extremely expensive. You probably want people in there in and out in a relatively short amount of time because you're not going to buy 20 of these for your hospital, right? And so a traumatic experience with a child and crying and that sort of thing isn't going to go well for them and their health outcome, and it's probably not going to help you turn over the equipment very quickly either. So it makes sense from all perspectives. But to serve, I think, is very, very human. So let's go back to the solutions we had from the 20th century, and then let's talk about the 21st century being very human. And what does that look like? And I think a lot of people have started to lay that out for us in the prior day and a half. I think it's about serving people. That's why businesses exist. I think we do it through journeys because that's how people live. That's how they engage with things. Not one system at a time, not one touch point at a time or one channel at a time, but they go through their lives trying to get their things done. And the better we can map to those, the better we serve them. And we don't just do it for the heck of it, right? We want to transform both them and our own organizations by knowing them better, by serving them better. We want them maybe to go from, if it's Zipcar, it's going from a driver to being, let's say, an urbanite, someone who doesn't think a car is something they have to have. They have the freedom of having a car whenever they want, though. How do you transform a customer into the one you want? How do you transform through that the organization to being the kind of organization you want to work for? So this is why I called the talk Future Perfect. is not because I think the future is going to be perfect, but I want to live in a future that's more like that. And I think the grammatical statement is very helpful, and I'd encourage you to use it at your own when you're trying to lead teams through this, is that we will have is the tense of a future perfect statement. Let's set a vision for what that's going to be like, and then talk about how we're going to get there. But it is a certainty, and we are going there, and that's how it's going to happen. So I have 3 things that I think we will have to have done. First, we've mastered planning for human experiences, because nothing happens if you don't have a plan, right? And I think one of the most common frustrations I have talking to UX managers is when they're just thinking of the thing right in front of them. I even hear frustration in the voices when they know that's happening. Oh, we're working really hard on this style guide, or we're trying to create a consistent brand image across all the touch points. Well, but to what end? Why are you doing that? How do you know when you're done enough? Because you're never going to have it perfect. So let's talk about planning, because if the only plan you have is the one that was handed down to you, you've probably already lost. It's probably a plan that comes from that 20th century mindset. It's probably about what do we need to make, how are we going to make it faster, and then how are we going to sell more of it. Those are all important questions, but I want you to answer also the why. Why are we doing that? How's that going to improve our relationship with the customer and serve them in a better way? So when we think about planning, it's pretty simple. It's not mind-boggling. It's the idea of, okay, what are we doing next quarter? And I think as a manager, as a leader, that stuff is locked down and happening, right? Because your attention needs to be further out. What's happening throughout the next year, right? So for the next 4 quarters, what's happening? How am I making sure that's happening? I'm putting the bricks in place so I know it's going to start moving that direction. And then in the next 3 years, working on envisioning and leading people towards that. How do I shape that vision? How do I start communicating it? So all the little pieces leading up there are going to start adding up to where we ultimately want to go. I really like this approach that Google does with teams to help start making these things happen. Hunter Walk talks about it. He says, each quarter, individuals and teams document their objectives for the next 90 days and grade their goals they set 90 days earlier. In Q4, teams also set meta goals for the next year. So I think oftentimes we think in annual goals and what are we going to get done by December? But if change is so rapid and change is so crazy and so much has to happen, I think there's something really powerful about entering an agreement with someone, and this is what helps build trust with you and your team, of what are you going to get done in the next 90 days, though? That's what's going to be exciting about what happens today, is how are you going to actually get that thing done? And if everyone's then setting the right goals and heading in the right direction, just imagine all the cool stuff that can happen. Think of it this way. 12 moves like this, I actually think can change anything. If you set the right goals with you, your staff, your team, had the right vision you're heading forward, 12 times, 12 moves, anything can happen. So, to get you started, just in case you don't have a plan right now, I'll suggest a couple of quick ideas. Move number 1, you need your people you're working with. A couple of years ago at a MX conference, Margaret Gould-Stewart, who's now, I believe it's Director of Product Design at Facebook, talked about the Super Friends team. That everyone on your team needs to have a superpower. That you know not to send the Flash to solve an underwater problem, right? Who do you put in the lead? Aquaman gets in the lead when there's an underwater problem. And they know it's their turn to lead, and you set them up for that, and they grow through that. And everyone else knows to step back, right? So how do you create that flexibility and dynamic sense? Also, not everyone's on the Super Friends, right? There's some people who just don't fit, and how do you find that and make those decisions? Okay, let's say 90 days. You make sure you have the right team. They understand what their super ability is, how to work together. If they have their 90-day goal of where they're going to go. Well, okay, now what you do is you spend the second 90-day period delegating your entire job to them. One of the top things I hear from managers is, I don't have enough time. That's why you have a team. It's really, really hard to delegate, let go of the things that you used to hold precious, but that is your job, is to help people grow, expand. And then this creates the ability for you to now create your own job description of what you really should be doing. Forget whatever job description, Teco, Peter Meerholtz. Don't let someone else write your job description, right? This gives you the opportunity to rewrite your own to what you really wanted it to be and what's going to be required to reach your goal. And actually, third is now your chance to make your vision for the future. You've created enough room, enough space, time for you to go do it. I'm not saying you're going to have 100% of your time by delegating it, but you're going to get a big chunk of it. And so now you can start articulating what is your vision of the future. What's the interesting stuff that the whole team wants to stay around for, help build out, and help make happen in those 90-day increments. So you got to research it, figure out, shop it around internally, make sure you have good enough alignment, break it apart, redo it, whatever is necessary in 90 days to feel like you've got the right vision. And then after that, I think you are ready to figure out your next 9 moves. Second, my second future perfect statement is that we will have mastered organizing for human experiences. How do you actually organize to create something that's much more human? I think it's interesting, P&G in the world of brands solved this years and years ago. This is Neil McElroy. He wrote a famous memo. I think it broke the one-page memo rule at P&G. And here's what he said. He actually called the role a brand man. You can tell it's very 1950s. But essentially it said this: how soap is made. Okay, P&G made a lot of different kinds of soap, Ivory, Almay, I think, whatever the various brands they have are. He said, how soap is made was no longer as important as how it was marketed and how it was bought. Let's stop organizing by which factory produces what type of soap. Let's have someone who's actually paying attention to our business from the way people actually work with our business. With soap, it was how it was marketed, which brands it was. And so let's have a person thinking about that brand and managing that brand that way. It was shocking. But it's now how brand is done, of course. And so to update that statement, how things are made is no longer as important as how they are experienced. That if you make something, but no one experiences it, no one engages with it, did it really exist? Was it worth all that? I think a lot of lean startup kind of mentality comes from this realization. Let's not waste the time on something no one's going to use. So, from an organizing perspective, I often see people deployed by types of activities they do on a UX team or a CX team. I see them organized by channel. I think it's really interesting to take a note from Brand and say, you know what, let's actually organize by the way people actually experience it. If onboarding is an important experience, let's have someone who's just focusing on that experience. What are we going to do? How are we improving it today? How are we improving it next year? What's the long-term vision for that experience? Right? Whether it goes across channels, whether it touches paper, call center, interacting via smartphone, whatever. Let's have someone looking at it from that perspective, because that's what matters. That will drive business, and that's actually going to drive service. And then finally, my last future perfect statement is that we will have mastered stories. As Daryl said yesterday, our best tools aren't the stuff that helps us create the visuals or helps us produce the code. It is the words we use. It's what inspires your teams, and it's what helps inspire the people who can support you and give you space to move it forward. So, as Patrick said, we had these great storybook kind of things that started off, but this is just the storybook. This is fairly detailed. But I still like these types of tools for showing journeys because, as our clients have told us, everyone in our organization wants to deliver a better experience. There's no one here that doesn't want it. But for some reason, it's because of our reporting hierarchies, the systems we use, the meetings we have, the PowerPoint, the email, whatever, we just don't quite get it done. But things like journeys, things like storyboards, show us what kind of experience the customer has now or what kind they really want from us in the future. And we can organize around that. We can change around that because it's clear where we need to go. But this is detailed, and I think we need to work hard on the higher level stories, the powerful stories, the things that are words, not just visuals. Because stories give meaning. I've been looking a lot at a lot of the research that's around happiness right now. One of the big controversies is, well, whenever we go out and test people's levels of happiness, the people who are parents score way different from the people who aren't parents. Parents aren't very happy. But you kind of ask them out of context or whatever, and it's like, no, I love being a parent, right? So what's going on there? And a lot of the research points to there's a difference between happy today and meaningful. Meaningful is a long-term thing. You look back or you anticipate ahead, and that is different than are you happy right now with the screaming kid. I don't think the message is that we all need to be parents now. I think the message, though, is how are you creating meaning for your team and the people you're working with? Because meaningfulness is why people perform. If you look at some of the writings by Daniel Pink, he talks about, up to a certain level, financial compensation incentives have real impact. And then after a certain point where someone feels satisfied and comfortable with that and they're not worried about that, those actually start creating dangerous decisions, bad decisions, and that meaningfulness, if you help people connect to what you're trying to do as a collective, as a team, where you're going and what the meaningfulness is in it, you get much better decision making, much better outcomes. It's not opinion, it's a lot of research he has been doing. So when we think of stories, when I think of powerful words, the one clear example is from Kennedy. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. I don't know why I go into a southern accent sometimes when I read that, but it's probably because I can't do the northeastern thing. So, this quote, though, led to very powerful results because it has a clear timeline to it. It has a story to it. You know what's going to go and happen, right? You know what you have to do. You know what success is, safely to Earth. It's surprising. It's exciting. Who doesn't want to go do this? So stories inspire people. And new words actually, I think, are some of the most effective things to changing culture. You can change environment. Like culture is one of those things you can't directly go, oh, we're going to adjust this aspect of culture. So you can change environment, process, things like that. New words are really powerful. If you say, we're going to care about the customer journey, and people start talking about journeys, how do you think that's going to change the decision-making that happens? Story-wise, just narratives are sticky. They stick in your head. They're repeatable. You repeat it 20 times, and then everyone else starts repeating it 20 times. And they are also inherently experiential. Just like the moon trip, everyone knows how it's supposed to roll out. Narratives are what sticks in our head because that is actually how our brain accepts information. It's part of our toolkit that's been wired in for billions of years. So, here's my story for us. My story starts with a bad guy. Not a bad guy, but a bad situation. That people aren't data. I think one of my big concerns going forward is that with big data and analytics and CRM, it is possible to know more about a person than ever before. But at the same time, I believe, used incorrectly, organizations can now be distanced, disconnected from people easier and more treat them just like a number. And you're never going to connect with them in a human way. You're going to stop serving them. And so in my story, my hero is you. It's making businesses human again. That how in 12 moves, remember those 12 moves? 12 90-day sessions. How do we create? Because we will have created human experiences by creating the systems and stories that end up providing them. We talked a lot about systems over the last couple of days, and so I thought back to a very helpful conversation I had probably 10 years ago with Jim Heskett, CEO of Steelcase, the giant furniture manufacturer. I think they're still parent company of IDEO. And he said, you know, going to Disneyland and going to the movies, those are both two systems. There's a huge amount of infrastructure and architecture and systems flow, supply chain that support both of those experiences. And you decide, everyone decides, which of these am I going to go to? Not based on all the structure, not based on all the systems, but that experience they end up providing. And which one's more fit, and which one's more attractive, and which one serves you better is the one you're going to go with. So how do we create those systems that are attractive, yes, but meaningful, and they really serve people, and they're really human? And those come out of those great stories you tell, the great plans you have, and how you organize to do it. So, in my story, we go over this edge together and identify all the little edges that we have to cross to do it. But we go to human experiences by serving people, by doing it through journeys, and it's because we want to transform them and we want to transform us so that we're connected and actually serving people in a really human way. Okay? We want systems that serve people. We want experiences that are very human. And I think, even though this is a little bit of a communication piece, I think this is another kind of car service that does it very successfully. Those in San Francisco who sees cars driving around with pink mustaches, this is a service called Lyft. Can we get sound?
And Lyft takes it one step further. Instead of just having a company coming to pick you up, you're having a person come pick you up.
Lyft is an app that you can download for free.
If you need a ride, you open up the app.
You request a driver, it shows you how far away they are.
It shows you a picture of the driver, but also a picture of the car.
A few minutes later, they show up.
You fist bump, because that's the Lyft thing to do.
And we're on our way.
Fist bump, right? But how human is that? I get connected with another person. I know who they are. We get to connect. This may not be for the introverts of the world, but the rest of them, yeah, hell yeah. And I think that's where things are tending to go, is these very human, very connecting kind of services, because that's what people are going to go to. Not the businesses that lock them in, that try to control, that try to exploit, but those over the long haul that are truly serving people. So, my question to you is, will the story and team and systems that you're working to create, will they have the empathy and humanness to serve people through these journeys? Because I think we need it, so I really hope that you do it. All right? It's my hope for y'all.